This is Zettelcast, brought to you by readers, writers, thinkers, and teachers from LiLLiPub, along with our partners in thought, our Zettelcastans. In this show, we share discoveries that our Zettelcastans have shown us.
There you go.
And compare notes on how we're using this marvelous invention in our creative work. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Brooke.
Let's do it again.
All right.
Episode 86, Reflection on the Water.
Well, hello and welcome to the Zettelcast. This is episode 86. Can you believe it? We are well into our second year. And this time around, we're exploring an interesting question because last time we were talking about fish swimming through water and how aware is a fish even of the water that they're swimming in. And we talked about situations that let the fish see the water and the insight and the revelations that came about from that. So this week we're taking a step back. Instead of being in the water, we're floating on the water and we're taking a relaxing, picturing floating down the river or just sitting in a pond fishing. We're reflecting. So we're taking an opportunity to step back from that experience and show what our characters are taking away from that. What happens after the big revelation? How does that begin to incorporate itself in the character's life? So for the round one, the question is, what does the character now understand clearly, and how might that bring about fundamental change, perhaps even transformation? And then in the second part is to write a scene that either shows your character reflecting on this or experiencing the outcome of the change or transformation that they have been through. Who would like to get us started? All right.
I would.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so round one. What Kelly now understands clearly is not simply that she must choose a life. The weird science room or the lab shattered something deeper than indecision. I don't have my glasses on. That's why I can't see. Okay, so, all right. So the weird science lab shattered something deeper than indecision. It exposed the hidden cost of trying to remain open to every possible self at once. For years, Kelly had treated movement as vitality, which is actually a good thing. Movement as vitality, that means you're alive, that you're moving, and your movement basically testifies to the fact of your aliveness. But I don't know, Kelly may have taken it a little too far. She looked at curiosity as freedom. And on Lydia, curiosity is a premium thing. So that's good. New beginnings as proof she was still alive. But the room pushed her to another possibility, the endless openness that could become its own form of avoidance. A person can become so devoted to preserving possibility that they never remain anywhere long enough to be transformed by it. Mrs. Bond was the geography teacher that she met in the weird science lab. Mrs. Bond's silent gesture devastated Kelly precisely because it cut through every strategy she had used to postpone becoming. Pick one. That was the demand that her teacher laid on her. Pick one. Do something. Not perhaps forever, perhaps not perfectly, but truly enough to inhabit it. The lab overwhelmed her because it did not merely show options. It confronted her with embodiment. Every path excludes other paths. Every lived life leaves unlived lives behind. Kelly suddenly understood that no human being can carry every future simultaneously without eventually fragmenting under the strain. But the deepest transformation begins after the lab. Outside in Henge Plaza, Kelly's nervous system collapses under the weight of too much meaning arriving too quickly. Her body becomes a storm field. Thought can no longer organize experience. She cannot reason her way back to coherence. Then Angie appears. What changes Kelly is not explanation, but regulation. Angie does not interpret the weird science lab for her. She does not tell Kelly which future is correct. She does not become a guru, an oracle, or a substitute compass. Instead, Angie offers something both smaller and more radical, a way for Kelly to remain inside herself long enough to hear her own life again. Through breath, pacing, spiral movement, and steady presence, Angie helps Kelly rediscover sequence. The body that moments earlier felt like an emergency site slowly becomes inhabitable again. That may be Kelly's true breakthrough. Not certainty, not answers, capacity. But perhaps the first time Kelly begins to understand that discernment is not the same thing as urgency. The task is not to choose the fastest way. The task is to hear the truest way. This realization begins reshaping her immediately. Instead of chasing relief through motion, she goes home and writes deliberately. Instead of trying to solve her entire future at once, she reduces the overwhelming into 3 categories. What can I hold? What can I follow? What I cannot carry tonight. That act alone signals transformation for Kelly. Old Kelly scattered herself across infinite possibilities. Emerging Kelly brings learning, sequence, scale, embodiment, and livable next steps into the picture. The transformation is not complete, but something irreversible has started. She no longer wants merely to experience life. She wants to become capable of inhabiting one. And that's that's Kelly. So she learned a thing or two.
A thing or two.
Yeah.
No wonder she got knocked on her butt.
Yep.
I
Yep.
find it fascinating that she hasn't found a path forward, but she's found a path to organize the possibilities so that she can think about a path forward.
That's it. Her mind is no longer blown completely. So she, before she met Angie, before she had the Angie experience, she basically was functionless. Her mind had been blown to the point where she couldn't even think about what she had just experienced. So, note from Tom, right? Yeah. So, I was very pleased that we had this experience, a la your prompt. Thank you so much. That was good, and I learned some things about me too, which I will not broadcast.
Okay. And can we share with our readers that your proud moment that you experienced this weekend?
Oh, yeah, my daughter graduated from law school this weekend, and so that's why I'm sitting in her campus apartment right now, and getting ready. I have one foot out the door, getting ready to go back home. So, yay, we got a lawyer in the family. It was really cool watching her walk across the stage, and they had, the name of the school, and then each graduate, they had the person's name, on this big, I don't know, this huge
Jumbotron?
Yeah. Good name for it, Jumbotron. Yeah, it was like, it's official, boom, kind of thing. So it was very nice. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this with the world, with our audience. That was very nice.
I continued on where Javi left off. He has just had the experience with the new lease on life effigy. That's really hard to say, in the Henge, and he has not had a chance to analyze or understand everything that he experienced in that split second, but he does have a sense of hope. So it picks up there. I can't say that he's quite had a breakthrough there. He's getting to the breakthrough, but he's starting to reflect on the things. And let's see, this first round is what they've learned, right?
Yes.
And so some of what he is going to be learning is spoilers, so I won't get into that. But one thing that he has learned is, and he doesn't realize he's learned it yet, but he's learned that he cannot do things by himself. He's going to need to be involved with other people. He tried a bit with Helen, and then that sort of didn't go anywhere because of both outside reasons and the choices that he made. He could have stayed. They could have continued to investigate the stuff together, but he thought that he was protecting her by doing it alone. At least that's what he told himself. So he's going to be coming to the realization, and the scene will help set this up, that he has things to learn from other people, and other people can help him, and he can help other people.
All right.
Super.
Good. All right. Who else wants to take on their round one? All right.
I can go. So I have to be very careful because there are things that I don't want people to know yet. So I'm going to go rogue. And the reason is I went in one direction with Margaret, and as I got a little way down that road and started thinking about the round one question, then I started thinking about the 10 questions. So I applied some of the 10 questions to what I was thinking she was going to come to understand, and it completely changed the course of where I was going into a much better direction. So that's the piece that I want to share so that people see the process of what that looked like. So we had talked a little bit last time, I believe, about Margaret and her son, Dylan, having some kind of a touch point or a connection that, like maybe something musical, some kind of recurring touch point. And I like that. But then when I started thinking about the round one question and what she's coming to understand and how she feels about that, my first thought was it would be very interesting to turn the early pieces of her coming to terms with what her situation is and where she's moving to with maybe some epistolary segments. So maybe diary entries or letters, and the questions I started asking from the 10 questions were, what would she be thinking? What would she want to say? obviously, how would she say it and who would she target? And immediately, the thing that became the anchor for her, which I think resonates probably with everyone, is it would be your family. It would be the emotional bonds of your family that kind of tether you to what you believe your reality is. Well, asking those questions and coming to that realization made me understand that letters won't work. That's not a viable option for the state that she's in and her situation. So, as I started to reflect on what those scenes might look like, and this is where I have to be careful, I decided something gothic would be way more interesting, and it's way more in line with how I imagine her thinking. This having a veil between what she's experiencing and what's actually going on, what's happening with her family and what they're experiencing. So there's kind of these levels that are happening. And so what's real, what she's experiencing, and how that unfolds, it's going to happen on one side for her, but the reader isn't going to know that until a little bit later. So I've sketched out a few scenes that I can't share, but but it throws into contrast ultimately the connections that happen emotionally and logically against the kinds of connections that we experience with the link. And it starts to bring into question what things are actually alive, in your thought world versus in your reality world. And how do those things play out as she starts to process what's really going on? So that's all I have to say about that.
Intriguing.
Yeah. Can't wait for the next call.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Oh my goodness.
But I have to say, the questions were great. The questions generated, they literally took me from what I thought was happening, helped me discover why that won't work, and shot me off in exactly the direction that it needs to go to make it work. So you never know. You just never know what's going to get you over the hump. So try everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. So, in last week's episode, I had Jenna in a sculpture park. I did not want, I evaluated, do I want to have this assignment be the next step of that, or do I want to have it be the next step of something else that I have previously set up in the Roanoke world? And I opted to do the latter, something that it's the next step for something else, because for me, the sculpture park is going to represent Jenna at a more mature stage. She is kind of like post some aspects of the revelation. And it's not all going to come to her like like the Moses's tablets, but she so I picked something else. The thing that she is going to be getting a very strong inkling about is going to have to do with what being friendly means to her. Because she has made it through this part of her life as a very friendly person who gets along well with everyone. And even in the little story that I read here, she's going to be seeing there's an unfriendly Jenna.
Oh.
Who is that? And what is she to do with her?
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Whoa.
Nice.
Now that's interesting because I sure haven't met the unfriendly Jenna.
Well, you've forgiven her because that's how you are. She hasn't quite forgiven herself though.
Okay. All right. Well, last we met Helen, she was in the Henge with Teresita, and she had, after having a rather frustrating day she's supposed to be this voice coach for Teresita, but she can't get a word out of her. And so it's been a really, really frustrating day. And she finally just mostly to just take up the remaining time, decides to pay a visit to the Henge. And so when they enter the Henge, they of course enter with a quote from Julianne, where they're supposed to embrace their questions as power tools. And so they end up coming into the Henge and they find themselves on this walking tour that's taking them from one effigy to another, where Helen has taken on her habitual role of being the leader, the explainer, the one that knows, and until she gets to one that she can't explain. Teresita gazes off in the distance at a bust of Ramon Llull, who comes up with our questions that we've been talking about, and seems to, from Helen's viewpoint, almost seems to be linking with this marble statue, and then comes out with an answer that explains the artifact that Helen could not understand. And in the process, not only that, explains it in very simplistic terms, but in a manner that actually educates Helen. She gets it based on Teresita's explanation. Um, and this is her moment of encountering the water. So that was from last week. So now what we're going to see, that is a huge, like someone has held up a card in front of her that she must read, and she recognizes that this is a role that she has been in her whole adult life. You know, she's the one who's always tried to talk sense into her husband, who's been very flighty and, you know, always wanting to play games. And she's been trying to teach him the reality. She raised her children as being the one who know. And so she's had this relationship where she's been, you know, her input from other people has been to trigger the output that she felt she needed to provide. And she was not in any kind of a normal conversation, although she loved being on the fringes of vibrant conversations. She just dearly loved being in a group of people where there was a vibrant conversation going on. But when trying to pursue this for herself has led into one dead end after another. But the water, seeing why that she's taken on this persona, and she's not let her inner self come out even to herself. So it's like, so she's going to be having to do a rather big exploration of, you know, it's a midlife crisis. You know? So that's where she is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we have had a round 2 where we've each written scenes based on this. Shall we go in the same order?
Okay, so round 2 is the scene. It's the next morning after the experience. The next morning arrived softer than Kelly expected. Not peaceful exactly. The weird science lab still lived somewhere behind her eyes. Like flashes of lightning, refusing to leave. But the violent inner splitting had eased overnight into something quieter and stranger. Less like panic now and more like pressure under deep water. She stood barefoot at the kitchen sink, holding a mug gone lukewarm between her palms. Outside the apartment window, early light moved across the roofs of the pale ribbons. Somewhere below, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. A dog barked twice and gave it up. Ordinary sounds. Yesterday, they would have disappeared underneath the noise inside her. This morning, she heard them separately. The realization unsettled her more than the panic had. She turned slightly and caught sight of the paper still lying on the table where she had left it before bed. What can I hold? What can I follow? What I cannot carry tonight? The page no longer looked desperate to her. It looked honest. Kelly crossed the room slowly and sat down beside it. Her eyes drifted toward the third column. Every version of me. Even now, the words tugged at her chest. She could still feel them as she let herself, those impossible branching cells pressing toward her all at once inside the weird science lab. The lives she might live, the selves she might become, the ache of futures unlived before they had even had a chance to happen. But something else had entered the picture now. Angie's breathing. Not the memory exactly, the rhythm. Kelly closed her eyes. Without planning to, she let one long breath leave her body the way Angie's had the night before, low and unworried, as though there was time enough to arrive inside one life before trying to outrun 10,000 others. Her shoulders drooped. It answered with less violence.
Hey, Deb, we
Yeah.
lost you at her shoulders drooped. Can you pick that up there? We lost
can't
you
hear?
at her shoulders drooped. Can you pick it up there? We
Can
can
you
hear you
hear me?
now.
Oh, her shoulders. Actually, her shoulders dropped slightly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The strange thing was this: the room inside her did not answer with certainty. It answered with less violence. Kelly sat there a long moment, noticing that difference. Then another realization rose quietly behind it, so quietly she nearly missed it. All her life, she had mistaken intensity for truth. Every dazzling possibility, every sudden fascination, every new beginning, she had treated them like instructions. But what if some things were not asking to be chased? What if some things were asking to be stayed with? The thought frightened her enough that she laughed once under her breath. Lord, she murmured, that feels suspiciously like adulthood. For the first time since leaving the weird science lab, the future did not appear before her as 1,000 screaming doors. Only one next step: find Angie. Not because Angie would choose for her, not because Angie possessed answers, but because Kelly suddenly understood the difference between being led and being steadied. And that difference might save her life. She picked up the page, folded it once carefully, slipped it into her coat pocket, and stepped out into the morning.
Mhm. Wow.
That's that.
That's that.
That's that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Beginning of what will still be a long journey.
I'm just going to say at the beginning, Angie is apparently in the zeitgeist this week because she
Nice.
showed up in my story too. So Javi has just collapsed after his experience, and so here we are. The sound of footsteps gradually penetrated Javi's daze, but he felt too dizzy to pay much attention to them. They grew louder, then stopped. He forced one eyelid to lift just enough to peer up at the blurry face above him. Hi, Javi, it's Angie. We haven't really crossed paths, but I work at the Henge too. This corridor can be a little bit rough. I find that tea helps with the dizziness. Would you like some tea? He nodded, and she sat next to him on the stone floor and pulled a metal tube out of her backpack. The top unscrewed and turned into a cup, which she promptly filled with steaming tea and handed to him. The steam bathed his face with a wild, spicy, and slightly floral scent. He tentatively sipped it. Immediately, his vision became sharper, and the whirling of the henge slowed down to its normal planetary rotation. Javi looked at his rescuer. Thank you. Angie, how did you know I needed help? I didn't, but I'm glad to be of service. How did you end up here? Most people stick to the newer refugees. These old ones are overwhelming. How did he end up here? He had come searching for the wisdom of the ancients, but instead the henge was like shifting sands. As soon as he thought he understood something, everything changed around him. Javi refocused on Angie and realized that she was still waiting for a response. I want to understand everything. Angie was silent for a moment, and then she asked, Is it true? Javi stared at her. The question seemed like a complete non sequitur, yet somehow it seemed also to throb with hidden layers of meaning. What? Was all he could manage in response. Angie smiled. The things that you believe, are they true? That's the first question you have to answer if you want to understand anything.
Oh,
Oh.
love that.
Hmm.
Tune in next week.
Yeah. But that reminds me,
okay,
it's sort of like a reverse encounter from the movie My Best Friend's Wedding, where the character played by Julia
Roberts.
Yes, thank you. And she's got a wedding ring that's not, or an engagement ring that's, or it's either a wedding or an engagement ring that's not hers. I think it's the wedding ring stuck on her finger, and she's lost her. She's absolutely at the bottom of herself, and she's out in the hallway of a hotel room, and here comes a maintenance guy, and he comes and basically says, I think it's my grandmother always said, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
So it's reverse of those roles, but yeah, I can absolutely see that happening, and Angie showing up at the right time,
Like she does.
Yeah.
like she does. I think it's time for me to go do my routine outside now.
Yeah, right.
Oh, goodness.
Cool.
All right.
Is it me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you can't read anything, right?
Well, here's what I can do though. I can read what I got rid of because
Oh,
I'm not going to use it
Nice.
now.
Love that.
And it's short because I almost immediately started asking the questions about, okay, hold on a minute. How do I want to do this? But initially, when my plan was to have her communicating with her family through letters, I wanted to show the process that someone goes through when they're trying to write this kind of letter. And I was going to make it kind of funny and kind of reveal some things about her that way, but I've scrapped all of that so I can read this. So it just opens with her, and this is where it kind of started to get weird because I couldn't decide, like, is she like in a hospital bed, like with one of those little tray things, and she's writing, and I'm like, that doesn't really feel right. And then I'm like, okay, maybe she's sitting at the chair. There's always the recliner next to the bed, so it was already going down the road that I was feeling like this was not right. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start with the letter. because that was the important thing to show. So she picks up her pen and she writes, "Dear Dylan, crap, I don't know what to say. Dear son, do you remember me at all? I imagine you'd be starting middle school about now." Seriously, stating the obvious. "My dear family, where in the hell are you?" And that was when I stopped, because I started to think, I don't want to characterize her that way. It just felt too real and too abrupt. So I scrapped all the letters and decided instead to go down this other road that I'm not going to tell you about. So yeah, the letters got scrapped.
I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's so valuable as writers to know that the things that don't make it help. You discover the ones that do sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was totally committed to that, and then I started asking questions, and I'm like, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
It's the wrong situation, like it's the wrong chronotope, time and place, and it's the wrong characterization of her, and it casts her in a light that I didn't like. It was just all wrong, and that was great, because then I was like, okay, what feels better? And bingo.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. So I have already established the fact that Jenna has avoided going to the henge because it creeps her out. But now she's in this contest that causes her to face that. And this follows her first day at the henge after a long time of not having gone there. And at the end of that visit, that's where she meets Xavi. And she also is there to learn that Sunny has, she and Sunny have both received very sad news about the death of someone close to them. This person is extremely close to Sunny. And so she ends up taking a detour from her normal plan, and she is accompanying Sunny home, and they're in no hurry. And this is called Radical Roundabout. Jenna and Sunny wheel southeast along Knowing Way, the broad pedestrian path that traces a diagonal route between the streets that abut and frame the henge. Lydia's sun now low in the sky to their right, they reach the crown. In full fragrant yellow bloom, this loose arrangement of shrubs memorializes the crown of radix, the tree whose fallen trunk came to rest here uncounted years ago. Knowing Way memorializes the direction of its fall, the crown its broad leafy head, and Radical Roundabout preserves a space of honor for the tree's buttressed stump. What a mighty presence Radix must have made in her heyday. The crown more than 200 feet away from the stump itself some 30 feet in diameter. Legend had it that Elsie's oldest altars and other ancestral handwork had been made from her lumber. Within the circle scribed by Radical Roundabout, the stump now holds center stage, literally, for celebrations, concerts, and outdoor theater. Even when, as on this late afternoon, no major production is going on, you can always catch some kind of modest show or many at once. Followers of Dill and Bert knew when to catch them jitterbugging and giving lessons. She and Sunny crossed the pedestrian bridge above the swifter vehicular traffic and enter the little park. Jenna takes the path to the right, keeping her bike along the curb of the walkway. She hears the glide and clatter of small wheels on the brick crossing behind her and turns to see Sunny heading toward the start of the park's skate path the other direction. He says through their thou, I'm going to take a few circuits. Meet you at knot. Jenna tosses a few virtual blossoms after his board. It feels good, a bit of a relief, really, to have this respite from Sonny's pain. Not that he has been dragging her into his grief without her consent, but her mind and heart have been all about it since the news about Millie hit. She feels that now that he has let out his own leash. And since and into the silence comes an issue she cannot continue to avoid. The skeeve. The Henge skeeve. Thank grace she always kept that term to herself. Henge weirdo did enough damage, thanks. But the skeeve. It's a real thing, not just a memory from childhood. She might have held hope of coming home and saying, "You were right, Dad. I don't know what I was thinking. The Henge is great." That's not on cue. Not for this evening, anyway. Yes, the Henge is great. It's a wonder of the Lydian world, obviously. And, if anything, it's more disturbing than she ever knew, with sneezes that put you in touch with death, and whatever insulting name they have for being engulfed in full-body frisson, and who knows what else. What else can the Henge add to the shudder and gnaw of the skeeve?
Mhm.
Speaking of insulting names, pitch and timbre and feel of her bike's tires change from critching on fine gravel to shooshing across inlaid brick crossings, and back to critching for a double whole note, and shushing for an eighth. Breve. Quaver. Breve. Quaver. If the skeeve is such a problem, she can just back out of the contest. Breve. Quaver. She's not looking for an excuse to quit. Quaver. Breve. Quaver. She's looking to level up. She's here in this life on Lydia to level up, isn't she? Critch. Shoosh. Yes, she is.
Dude! Thereby fully demonstrating what I pointed out in newsletter issue number 3. I'm just Woo! Fantastic.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, everybody's confronting their revelations, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So here's Helen's, and it's the title is Conversation Takes Practice. Back home that evening, Helen was glad to find the house empty. When she had offered to take Teresita to visit the Henge, she had timed it so they wouldn't have time left to kill after they were back out. She cringed at the remembered thought. Now she had a touch of grief that they had had no greater exchange than the mutual questions on their cue cards as they exited through the gift shop. What do you want to learn more about? Teresita had spoken first and expressed a desire to learn what it meant to have an economy, and if others were possible besides attention and curiosity, and how one chose their economy, or if one even got to choose. Thinking that there was no time like the present to begin her new self, Helen had confessed to wanting to know more about Ramon Llull. Oh, he's Bala's favorite, Teresita had offered, but she didn't say who Bala was, and not yet being practiced at being her new self, Helen had not managed to keep the conversation going, as she simply wondered to herself, without inquiring, who Bala might be. Clearly, Teresita was used to conversing with someone, Why then had she been mute the entire day with Helen? Tea seemed to be a good way to transition into the evening, so Helen started the kettle before going upstairs to change clothes. Halfway into her slouchiest comfy clothes, Freddie linked to say that he'd be home for dinner after all. Oh, I'm going to have a real conversation, she promised herself, and changed instead into her most attractive at-home wear.
Is Freddie ready?
Well, not to spoil things, because I'm not planning to detail it in the story, it's not going to go as planned. Because Freddie's used to a whole lifetime of the kind of conversations that they've had. He's just not ready. I mean, he doesn't pick up on the clues that she wants a different conversation. It picks up on a different set of clues, so the evening isn't wasted. But but it's not a conversation, as pleasant as it turns out to be. So
An adult interaction.
yes, not brought to the page. And then, of course, she's going to have a challenge or two with her daughter, and so she realizes that this conversation stuff is going to not be as easy as she thought it was. But that's okay, because Teresita isn't used to it either, and they're going to teach each other. The clue that's going to be dropped with Freddie is that she's going to mention the name Bala. And Freddie, of course, who knows who the real Bala is wondering who this other Bala might be. And so that's going to be a link to somebody figuring out that she's communicating with Bala on the ship. But nobody's got that figured out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the sort of thing, it feels like we have mutually decided that our audience knows something about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a spoiler for the characters.
Yes. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
The readers are in on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, when they first figure it out, it's going to be, it's like an imaginary playmate for her, because she's listened to so many of the tapes.
Yeah.
But then the questions will be, but there wasn't one on Ramon Llull.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Well, do we have time for a bonus round? Does anybody have something in particular that they want to share? We'll take a few minutes extra for that.
The 10 questions of Ramon Llull become especially powerful after a breakthrough experience like Kelly's, because they help transform overwhelming revelation into inhabitable inquiry. The Weird Science Lab floods Kelly with too much meaning simultaneously. Everything arrives at once: possible selves, possible futures, possible losses, possible callings. The result is fragmentation. Llull's questions offer something different: sequence. Not answers imposed from outside, but structured ways of remaining in relationship with what has been revealed. Angie would likely understand that instinctively. She would not use the questions to interrogate Kelly or force conclusions prematurely. She would use them the way a skilled guide uses stepping stones across fast water, one staple contact point at a time. For example, weather, first question. Did the experience feel true, or even if incomplete? Did the experience feel true even if incomplete? This grounds Kelly in discernment before interpretation. Next question, what? What exactly disturbed her most? The futures, the choosing, the exclusion. This separates the experience into workable parts. Why? The next question. Why did the command pick one strike so deeply? This reveals the hidden structure beneath her lifelong pattern of endless openness. Of what? Next question. Of what has Kelly constructed her identity until now? Curiosity, movement, possibility, avoidance. Now the revelation becomes psychologically meaningful. Next question. Of what kind? What futures felt inhabited and which merely exciting? This may become one of the most important distinctions in Kelly's growth. Next question. How much uncertainty can she carry without collapsing into panic or outsourcing agency? This restores scale and realism. When? Next question. When has she previously mistaken intensity for truth? Now, the present revelation connects to lifelong patterning. Where? Where in her body does truth settle differently from fear? This integrates Angie's fascia and breath work directly into discernment. How? How does a human being choose without needing absolute certainty first? This reframes maturity itself. With what? With what practices, relationships, rhythms, and forms of attention can Kelly remain inhabitable enough to continue becoming? This may ultimately become the central question of her entire arc. Used this way, Lull's questions don't shrink mystery. They make mystery livable. And that is exactly what Kelly needs after the weird science lab experience. Not immediate certainty, but a way to remain conscious, embodied, and honest while crossing into the next version of herself. And that, my friends, is that.
Oh my goodness. We can really see the difference here between the styles, because in the previous week we were exploring feelings and how awareness begins to grow amorphically within an individual. And this week we're exploring the thought realm. How do you analyze things? How do you break things down into small enough parcels that you can get your head around them? So we've kind of been covering both the head and the heart, and you really blended them extremely well in your work, Deb, because when you think about it, that how would someone take an experience of total overwhelm and get a handle on it and now begin to come out of it without just grabbing onto one to collapse into certainty prematurely, just to dispel all of the confusion. So I talk about maturity, snapping from immaturity to really, really a solid approach. It's really very incredibly well displayed.
Yeah. The fascia healing has so many benefits that we are all just discovering, thanks to Mr. Cobb. And people should grab onto the opportunity, if he has the next cohort to become involved. This is a good and positive, wonderful thing to connect your fascia, get your youthful bounce back. Yeah. Okay.
One thing that I intend to do, and it is so Jenna interacting with the Henge. She can't bring her link in there. She, like other people her age, has been well trained in using memory techniques, although she hasn't really needed to use them as much because she depends on her link, which she can't do when she's in the Henge. But she's going to discover that there are plenty of places where those questions are laid out in order to animate certain important debates that have happened in human history. And those ways that they're laid out are very convenient memory palaces for her to just, she's been there. She doesn't need to use it for the particular topic. She can just wander in her mind from one place to the next to the next. And that's one of the things that she'll do with this question.
Okay. Anyone else have anything, any special insights? I mean, if they want to share with that?
I just worked the first question into the scene, which
Yeah.
of course the first question is whether something is true or not.
Yeah.
And Angie, being, I'm sure, well versed in these questions, is just feeding the first step to Javi.
Yeah, and obviously in this one, whether is Jenna's question without being named as the question. It's, do I stay or do I go?
Okay. Well, then, without further ado,
Yeah.
if you would like to know more about what's going on in this world in Roanoke, you can come on over to LiLLiPub.org. It's where we hang out when we're not here in YouTube land. And oh, do we have a lot of fun. We share our stories over there. We offer to everyone the chance to share the stories in Fusion Writing. You can meet up with Mel in his wonderful newsletter group. Victoria has her writing group she teaches over in Fusion Writing and also shares her newsletter with us all there. So please come on over to LiLLiPub.org.
Please do.
See you there. Bye-bye.
Bye.